Hi there. Welcome to the From Lab to Launch podcast by Qualio, where we share inspiring stories from the people on the front lines of life sciences. Tune in and leave inspired to bring your life-saving products to the world.
Hi, everyone, and thank you for tuning in to From Lab to Launch podcast, brought to you by Qualio. I'm Meg, your host, and I'm delighted to be here with you today. Before we dive into today's episode, we'd love it if you could take a moment to rate and share the podcast with your circle of science enthusiasts. And if you're interested in being a guest on the show, please check out the application in the show notes. Today, we're excited to be joined by two distinguished guests from Ovid Therapeutics. First, we have Dr. Toshiya Nishi, a veterinarian by training with over 20 years of experience in drug discovery and translational research at Takeda Pharmaceutical. Toshiya played a pivotal role in the discovery of soticlestat, a drug co-developed with Ovid Therapeutics. Now, as the Senior Director of Drug Discovery at Ovid, he's spearheading research on KCC2 activators, aiming to develop innovative treatments for neurological disorders.
Sorry, Meg, I'm going to jump in and be the rude PR person. It's Saticklistat. So like almost like tickle, Saticklistat.
Okay.
So I don't know if you want to do that piece over again
Sure.
or okay.
Saticklistat. Okay. Yeah, I can start from that sentence. Dr. Nishi played a pivotal role in the discovery of Saticklistat, a drug co-developed with Ovid Therapeutics. Now, as a Senior Director of Drug Discovery at Ovid, he's spearheading research on KCC2 activators, aiming to develop innovative treatments for neurological disorders. Also joining us is Jason Tardio, the Chief Operating Officer of Ovid Therapeutics. He has over 2 decades of experience in the biopharmaceutical industry, including leading with multiple sclerosis franchise at Novartis. We'll get into the inspiring story of Ovid Therapeutics, a company dedicated to creating life-changing medicines for patients with rare neurological disorders. We'll discuss their journey from inception to launch and advancing the field of neuropharmacology. So let's get started. Welcome to the show, Jason and Toshiya.
Thank you for having me.
Great. Can you tell us a little bit more about how the two of you got connected and the story behind Ovid Therapeutics?
Sure, I'll start. So Ovid Therapeutics has been around since 2014, so it's nearly a journey of 10 years as a company. And the company was founded with a mission to dive into neurological research. At this time, Meg, I think it's important to understand 10 years ago, many companies were actually running away and divesting a number of their neuroscience programs. And so the founder of the company, a gentleman by the name of Matt During, saw an opportunity for a company like Ovid to actually pivot towards neuroscience and specifically rare conditions of the brain. And so thus he formed a company initially around a medicine called gaboxidol that he in-licensed from a company called Lundbeck. And the premise for that specific medicine was its potential impact on a number of rare neurodevelopmental disorders. And so that product was studied in conditions like Angelman syndrome and Fragile X syndrome as well. During his time of starting this company, he was also looking to expand and diversify the pipeline. And he had relationships with a number of the key R&D executives at Takeda. And through a meeting with Takeda, they had a discussion about a medicine called Saticklistat that certainly Toshiya can tell you a little bit more about, but a medicine that had been studied in a variety of different preclinical animal models within neuroscience, and Alzheimer's, for example, and other conditions. And in some of these models, there were some clear signals about the potential for this medicine to be an anti-seizure medicine. It was suppressing seizures that would normally erupt in some of these animal models, specifically animal models of Alzheimer's. And so Takeda had an idea that this could be a nice anti-seizure approach. They tested the medicine in a number of animal models of epilepsy, specifically Dravet syndrome, and it seemed to work. But they did not have at that time epilepsy experience. They didn't have rare neurology experience. And so it could have been just a serendipitous meeting of the two, because Ovid was this company focused on rare neurological disorders. Takeda had this asset that they believed could work in some of these rare epilepsies, but didn't quite know the approach to take. And lo and behold, a relationship was started.
That's an amazing journey. Toshiya, you played a critical role in the discovery and development of Saticklistat. What was it like to discover the potential that it holds, and how did that moment of realization feel for you as a scientist?
Well, yeah, as Jason mentioned, it's a total serendipity. But first and foremost, let me note that all the discovery work for Saticklistat was done in Takeda while I was there, and that should be noted. Yeah. First of all, I would like to explain briefly about Saticklistat on its own. I'm biting my tongue a little bit though. It is a small molecule inhibitor of an enzyme called cholesterol 24 hydroxylase. Another complicated name though. It's an enzyme, explicitly expressed in the brain, playing a role for regulation of cholesterol metabolism in the brain. But this enzyme was not studied extensively as a drug target for many, many years ago. So in a way, just discovery of Saticklistat, small molecule inhibitor on its own is actually a serendipity. We then published a paper back in 2020 from the journal Scientific Report. We described how we ended up with discovery of anti-epileptic property of Saticklistat. That was quite a bit of serendipity. As described in the paper, Saticklistat was initially evaluated in an animal model of Alzheimer's disease. It was not a seizure model, but interestingly, this animal model, it was a mouse model. Animals die suddenly, prematurely. It's a sudden death. So you never see how they die. But I was lucky or unlucky enough to encounter a couple of moments of animal death. And they apparently die of seizure. And actually, I looked up the literature, and this particular mouse model of Alzheimer's disease is known for a high mortality rate. And lo and behold, we serendipitously realized that Saticklistat treated animals had a few cases of death and survival benefits. So that led us to a hypothesis that Saticklistat has a potential to be a seizure medication protecting animals from dying from seizure. That led us to the series of studies of Saticklistat in a whole bunch of different seizure models, and that study was already published from journal Epilepsy in 2020. So yeah, Saticklistat is a product of many serendipities.
It is. It sounds very serendipitous, the journey to you two meeting together and Saticklistat coming to be a treatment for epilepsy. For Jason, given your background in the industry, what strategic initiatives at Ovid Therapeutics have you found most particularly impactful in advancing treatments for neurological disorders?
Yeah, well, I can tell you what drew me to Ovid Therapeutics. I was drawn to the company because it has a clear focus on patients and patients living with, at the time, rare orphan-related specific conditions, patients that had no pharmacological options. And so for me, that mission around trying to find and bring some hope to these families and these individuals living with these conditions, again, in which they had nothing, spoke to my heart. And so that's what drew me to the company. Ovid still has a very clear focus on developing medicines of high unmet needs, specifically in epilepsies and other seizure-related disorders. But we also have a vision of expanding beyond that into more general brain conditions as well. And so the story in my 5 years here has evolved. As I mentioned, When I first started, we were clearly rare neurodevelopmental disordered company. And in parallel, we had this program, Saticklistat, through a partnership with Takeda, and we were developing medicine for a number of rare epilepsies or developmental and epileptic encephalopathies. Since then, we've evolved, as a lot of companies do, and expanded our breadth a bit. So again, we still have a clear focus on epilepsies, but we've broadened our pipeline to largely focus on a number of small molecule, best-in-class, first-in-class therapies that focus on a whole range of conditions. Our most advanced program is a drug called OV888/GV101. This was a highly selective ROCK2 inhibitor through a collaboration with a company called Graviton. We had identified a condition called cerebral cavernous malformations. This is a condition that affects upwards of 1.5 million individuals in the United States. They develop these raspberry-like lesions within the central nervous system. And these lesions cause a whole host of symptoms, everything from seizures, which is why we got drawn to this condition, but also headache, leg and arm weakness, etc. But also there's a very severe risk of these lesions hemorrhaging or bleeding. And if they do so, they can cause a whole host of downstream consequences. There's no approved therapies for this respective condition, and there's good biological rationale and good animal model data to support that a highly selective ROCK2 inhibitor like OV888/GV101 could have benefit. And so we're finishing a phase 1 for that respective asset, and we'll be announcing those results in the first half of this year, in the next month or so. And we hope to move that into a phase 2 program later this year. Beyond that, we also have a program that's in phase 1, OV329, which is a next-generation GABA aminotransferase inhibitor. This is a validated approach to epilepsy. There's a first-generation medicine called vigabatrin that's quite effective in a number of refractory epilepsies, but it comes with an ocular toxicity signal. About 30% of patients develop visual field deficits. And so we believe our molecule, OV329, a much more potent GABA aminotransferase inhibitor, could be dosed potentially at a much lower dose. You might not see some of the accumulation you see with vigabatrin, and therefore we might be able to eliminate this ocular toxicity or adverse event. We're finishing up a phase 1 in the oral formulation of that, and we're also moving forward an IV formulation. We'll file an IND this year and hope to move that into a phase 1 program next year for status epilepticus. And then behind that, as Toshiya mentioned, we have, and he's working very diligently on, a library of compounds that are direct activators of the potassium chloride cotransporter 2, or KCC2 channel, which is a channel specifically located in the central nervous system. This channel is implicated across a variety of conditions, everything from rare conditions like Rett syndrome, certainly epilepsies, but also even potentially more broad conditions like schizophrenia and psychosis. And so we believe we're the only company working on direct activators of this channel. We'll file a first IND later this year in the most advanced compound, which is a drug called OV329, and hope to get that into humans next year. So we've advanced our thinking, but we're still a company at our core that focuses on patients. As I've mentioned, focuses on conditions of high unmet need. And we're really excited about the programs that we're bringing forward.
I'm really excited to see all the things that you guys are pushing out and accomplishing this year. It sounds like a lot of exciting news coming out of Ovid this year. That's great. It's a unique opportunity to have you both here on the show together. In a perfect world, how should someone in an operations role and a drug development or scientist role work together?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, as Jason, introduced me, I am now spearheading, just drug discovery and preclinical development of KCC to activator program. It's such an important protein regulating a fundamental mechanism of our brain. So, I mean, we are envisioning application of KCC to activator to a wide spectrum of brain disease, as he mentioned. Fundamentally, I mean, my discipline is pharmacology, which means identification and maximization of the therapeutic values of drug candidates, which is really, really interesting. I mean, as you introduced me, Meg, I am a veterinarian by training. So this is where my background as a veterinarian plays a role. In the veterinary science course, you need to learn a lot of things. I mean, many diseases, and including even parasitosis, even a fish disease, all sorts of things, pathology and histology. That way, I mean, I tend to see brain diseases slightly from a different perspective from other authentic neuropharm causes. Interestingly, in this industry, most of veterinarians work as a toxicologist, but I would strongly recommend a firm cause as a career opportunity for a veterinarian. Now we do have our own advantage to contribute to drug development.
Absolutely.
And Meg, what I would add there is, look, we're a small company at Ovid Therapeutics. We're roughly 50 employees, give or take. And so whether we like it or not, we're forced to work together very closely across all functions. And my role as the Chief Operating Officer, my job in a very simplistic form is to ensure that the company operates at an efficient level across all functions on a daily basis, that all of us are collectively marching towards accomplishment of the goals and objectives that the company has set forward. And so when we think about kind of Toshiya and what he does and his team and how some of my functions interact, I mean, clearly Toshiya is driving a lot of our early research, but even early on in research and development, you need to be thinking about the end game, right? What is the ultimate goal? What is the condition that we could and potentially may want to address with these assets? What's the opportunity? What's that path? And as you do this, you need a lot of insight and input across the variety of the functions of the organization. For example, the commercial function reports into me. And so one of the things you always have to ask is, all right, well, what would be the commercial opportunity if we brought this drug into XYZ condition and everything goes smooth and we get this to patients? What is that opportunity here? What does that return on that investment look like? And so you need to start thinking about these things early on. And so as a small company, we do work very closely together. And I think that's one of the positive attributes of a company like Ovid is that because we're small, we're agile, we're flexible, but everyone is very close and we drive towards a similar goal.
Great. On that note of working all together and driving for that same goal, here at Qualia, we provide an EQMS software companies for life science companies like yourself. So quality is near and dear to our hearts and mine, especially as our quality manager. So I like to ask executives and scientists, as you're developing drugs to bring to market for patients, how are you ensuring a quality of culture on your teams?
A quality of culture?
Yes,
Yeah.
Quality of culture.
Yeah, well, look, I mean, culture should be embedded in a company. It should be woven into the fabric of what a company does day in and day out. Culture can be defined as a lot of different things. The way that I personally define it, and then I'd love to hear Toshiya's thoughts on this, is culture is what you feel when you walk through the doors of an organization, right? How does the vibe of the company feel? How do people, as we just discussed, collaborate and work together? How do people support one another? One of the things in the biotech industry is you take risks, you take calculated risks. Those risks, more times than not, don't work. How are we supporting one another and extending a hand to pick someone up when maybe their experiment didn't work, but we give them a good pat on the back and say, look, what can we learn from this as we move forward? That's what culture is all about. And it also goes back a little bit to one of the things I mentioned about what attracted me to Ovid Therapeutics. Patient centricity, I think, is a key part of culture as well. I mean, look, we'd be naive if we said here and said that we're a non-for-profit. We are a for-profit entity. We're a publicly traded company. So there is a business aspect to what we do. But I've always believed that if you put the patient first, you put the needs of the patient first, you drive forward drug development and then subsequent commercialization, with a specific laser focus and what's in the best interest of the communities that you're going to serve, that the business and the profits will follow. And so I think all of these are components of culture. I hope that answers your question. Toshiya, I'm sure you have thoughts.
Yeah, absolutely. To me, I mean, as an R&D organization, everything is down to risk tolerance. I mean, drug discovery, drug development is innately very, very difficult. But what we have as what we should have a culture component to be successful organization. It's a good balance of risk tolerance. Indeed, I mean, in Ovid corporate culture, we have a couple of properties. I would like to point out: be courageous and be curious. I mean, these two are fundamentally important culture woven into the organization of Ovid. Without that, I mean, we are often intimidated of doing new things. I mean, especially in my responsibility, I am working on drugs with new mechanism of action, which is quite challenging. But Ovid certainly has a culture of encouraging to not be afraid of risk. And of course, we need to consider the risk and benefit balance. But this organization has a right set of mindset, driving the R&D, which is innately, high risk. That is exactly I wanted to come to Ovid. And this philosophy has been actually inherited from the founder of Ovid, as Jason pointed out, who is Matt During, who is super courageous. He was a fearless person, and he still remains an important role model, eternal role model in my mind.
That's great. I love that. Be curious and be courageous. That's great advice, Toshiya. Well, our last question is more of a fun one. We like to ask each of our guests, if we ran into you at the bookstore at your local library, in which section would I find each of you?
Ooh, Toshiya, do you want to go first?
I like social science,
Okay.
because I mean, I'm a scientist, and I like economics. I actually subscribe to the Economist. I tend to see, anything happening in this world from a scientific perspective. I want to understand why this is happening. What is driving this? I mean, I'm not a social scientist, but I always enjoy view all of difficult things happening today. But I always want to understand what is behind this. So for that reason, I will love social science. Probably you will find me there.
Okay, perpetually curious.
Yeah, for me, Meg, I definitely skew more nonfiction than fiction. And if I had to go through subcategories and I had to pick one, it'd probably be biographies. I love learning about people, their journey, how they've gotten to where they're at, the struggles they've had in life, how they've overcome those. And so, yeah, I'm certainly 100% nonfiction versus fiction, biographies, other historical accounts of events. I love learning about history and people.
Always good lessons to learn from history. So, well, thank you so much for sharing that little personal bit and your story at Ovid. Thank you so much again for joining us. And where can those who want to follow along with your journey find you and connect?
It's my pleasure. Thank you.
Yeah.
So for me, obviously our website from a company perspective is www.ovidrx.com. And you can find me on LinkedIn, Jason Tardio, Tardio.
Great. Thanks, Jason.
Great. Thank you.
Thank you both.
Thank you.
Bye now.
Bye.
Thank you for listening to this week's episode of From Lab to Launch, brought to you by Qualio. If you like what you've heard, please subscribe and give the show a positive review. It really helps us out. For more information about Qualio, our guest today, or to be a guest on a future episode, please refer to the show notes. Until next time.